We're continuing unit number 10 of the Morenu unit. We're on page 5, unit 10. We started off with the question of, is there a part of the fruit, of the vegetable, of the Shmita, fruit and vegetable, that you could cut off and just put in the garbage because it's not really part of the fruit? If it comes to the edges, cucumber edges, the Yerushalmi seems to say there is a minimal amount that you could cut off the ends and just put in the garbage, and that's it. The Rambam seems to say that only if it's inedible or no one eats it. And the Baalat Tosafot seem to be more lenient as far as that's concerned. And this raises the question, what about the parts of the fruit and vegetable that maybe you won't eat, but you stole it from the animals? The Torah says, right, so they have their equal rights, maybe secondary rights, not equal, but still they have their rights. They'd be within their rights to demand to have their share, right? The animals deserve their fair share of the Shmita fruit and vegetables. Right? Oh, okay, good. So the question is, what about them? In other words, now again, you can look at this in two ways. You can say, so you'd be obligated to go out and find that animal that would eat the potato peel. Or you can say, I don't necessarily have to go out and find the animal, but I have to be aware that I peeled my potato, that I effectively wasted what those animals out there would eat. In the past, I gave the example of a person who goes to the Shul Kiddush and takes the bottle of Coke in Corona times. It has a swig of the Coke right out of the bottle, right? And that's wasting it for everyone else, right? Why? Even not Corona. I forgot you're British. Oh, Austrian, the flap. Yeah. Now, so if you do that, if you do that, you wasted everyone else's, and that's the problem. Right, the problem isn't just a matter of kedusha. It's also you're wasting others. So if I peel my potatoes, it might be that maybe I won't actually find that behemah, but I still have to be aware this still has kedusha just because the animals because the animal owns it. Now I don't have to go out of my way to find the animal, but beseder, but that doesn't remove the kedusha from it. Right? So that's the question. So let's see the Chazon Ish Siman Yud Imrov bnei Adam ein mechadin otan lebehemah. How many people in your neighborhoods actually save the potato peels to give the animals? Approximately 0. Correct. In Muktzah, you have a similar criteria, right? In Muktzah, it's a very important question. I'll just explain what Philip was saying. It's a very important question if someone's la'aleinu, fridge or freezer goes off on Shabbos, and now the Shabbos are going to start being hot, and you're concerned that your meat is going to defrost and spoil, right? Now the meat, presumably, the meat you have in the freezer could be muktzah. Why? Because you can't. It's inedible at the moment. Now, if it's red meat, a lot of it could be eaten in this or that way. There are ways, right? You could eat raw beef in certain ways. So that there's more room to make. A lot of that chicken, you get sick from that, right? If you just take a defrosted chicken and eat it as is, you get sick, right? You can't do that, right? But you can feed it to the cats, right? Right, but no one does that. No one buys a chicken from 11 and feeds it to the cat. So as far as you're concerned, you're maktzeh it from the cat, right? The fact that a cat would theoretically eat it doesn't help you when it comes to Shabbos, right? But here it's a bit different. Why? Because here theoretically it could be different. What? Correct. If you could cut it, spice it, and eat it on Shabbos, so yes. I don't know how to do it, but I know there are methods of doing it. What? Again, the question is, what do you mean by salting? If you mean salting, that by salting you'll turn it into something else, right? that you might have a problem doing. But if we talk about just putting some salt, pepper, whatever, salt, pepper, vinegar, and eating it right away, I think that's possible. Again, I don't know if all meat is made for it. Loda, I'm not sure. But you definitely you get a carpaccio, right? In a restaurant. How do they do that? It's not salted like herring. You know what I'm saying? No, you know what I mean? It doesn't sit and get salted for a month or whatever. It's very fine. Oh, so that I'm not sure that any piece of meat you get from the freezer to Rami Levy would be able to be used for that. I'm not sure. I'm saying definitely not. All right. But so I'm saying it depends on that, basically. It would be edible b'shat adchak, even, right? But here is different. Why? Because here the question is, here theoretically, we'd say it's different, because here it could be claimed that it's a matter of ownership, or if not ownership, then right. Because the behemah has its rights in the fruit, in the vegetation. Now, I might not necessarily be required to go out and find this behemah, but that doesn't mean it gives me the right to say, all right, since I'm not going to bother, so there's no kedusha, right? But the Chazon Ish says, no, in the end, it does depend on the individual. Like the chicken, right? Just like the chicken, the mice, people don't feed the cats their raw chickens. Mimele, it would be muktzah, and so too, there's the opposite, right? Since most people don't bother gathering the potato peels, it's also not kadosh. So there could be reasons why lumber would be kadosh shvit, but since most of it is not picked for that, it's not. So too, when you pick the potatoes, and this goes back to what Rafi pointed out last time, right? That when you pick the potato already, then you know the peel is probably going to be thrown out. Again, let's not get into the argument of potato peels. So you might argue with the specific potato peels, usually, but the idea, the edges of the cucumber. Miu yesh la'ayin, italui b'makom she'em nimtza'im, אבל זה בתרו בדעלמא, הדבר מסור לחכמים כפי התשמיש הנאות להם. אפשר שהתשמיש הנאות הוא ליצנן לבהמה ועדיין קדשי. So, the Chazon Ish has a very Chazon Ishnik kind of question. So, I asked how many of you have people who save the potato peels for the animals in their neighborhoods, and the answer was 0 because you're rural urban, right? But I imagine that if I'd be giving this shiur in, whatever, some itnachlut somewhere, some kibbutz somewhere, whatever, the answer might be different, right? So, okay. So, do we say because those itnachlut / kibbutzim exist in our midst, so it affects all of us? Or only in the kibbutz? It's like that, right? You see the question, right? We have a similar question on Shabbat when it comes to muktzah, right? The Gemara says that certain kinds of plants would not be muktzah in a certain place because there they feed the animals this plant, right? In other places it would be muktzah because there's no use. The plant it's not a useful plant, it's a kind of thorn. It's not useful if you don't have that animal in your area. That's what the Gemara says. On the other hand, so the Rishonim ask in another Gemara, it says that if people even in the places where people normally carry baskets on their heads, it would not be considered tiltula on Shabbat. Because it's not a normal way of carrying, it's still not, there's no Isur D'oraita of carrying on your head. That's very useful for me. Right. Now, you have to practice balancing, but yeah. Anyway, so Rishonim say, but why is it that in the first case you say that it isn't muktzah because the people there uses machal bema? The second case we say no, even the places where people do normally carry on their heads, it's still not a proper tiltul. What's the difference? The Rishonim basically say it depends on what you'd do if you were in their shoes. In other words, they say the Rishonim basically say there's no real justification to carry stuff on your head. So even if everyone in your area decided to be weird, so you're all weird. So that's basically what the Rishonim say. On the other hand, you don't have camels here. But if you're in the desert, you'd have a camel, and then you'd need that thorn to feed your camel. So it's true that only in places where they have camels are these plants useful. But anyone who's in such a situation would act the same. So now the Chazon Ish isn't sure what should our thing follow. Why is he more machmir here? He should say, well, it depends on what's normal by you. So when the vegetable is being picked, that's one way of looking. The one way of looking at it is when it's being picked, what do people think? Right? That's one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it is you could look at the person who's picking the plant, the fruit, the vegetable. So you could look at the animal's rights, right? Since there are animals, and since people do have goats, and the goats have the right to these potato peels, the goats don't live by us, but the goats, right? But the potatoes don't grow by us either, right? The potatoes grow near Ashkelon. They're brought to Ramat in Gush Etzion, and then I take them from Ramat in Gush Etzion to Efrat, right? Otzar Beidin, and not to Batayin, where they would have been fed to the goats. So who decided that I could throw the potato peel in the garbage? Maybe, as I can't argue, this is not a potato that's grown in the frat, right? It was just a matter of the question of, right, the potato's luck, well, the potato end up in a frat or in Batayin, right? And that's a 50-50 chat, not 50-50, but whatever, right? It's whatever. That's right. There's a reasonable chance they'll end up in Batayin or Tkwa, right? And not in the frat, right? So why does it end up there, not there? Whatever, the chance. So who makes that decision? So that's why the Chazon Ish, I think that's why the Chazon Ish is saying, are you saying what happens here, go by the person who picked it, or what happens here, or what most households here do, or most households in the country do, or Bichlal, the animal has a right, and therefore it has the Kedusha. But the Sofosha of the Vard will depend on the people. In other words, if most people don't bother, if all people don't bother saving the potato peel to give the goats, they wouldn't have Kedusha mitzad the goats at all, even the places where they are saved for the goats. So?
Except if nobody's safe, then you don't have anybody.
Sorry?
No, you said if nobody's safe, then you said
I'm saying if you choose to be weird and to save it for your goats, that doesn't obligate anyone else around you. That's what that doesn't make your next door neighbors also have goats, of course. You just live in that kind of place, right? Now, what?
I would think animals have special things.
Yes, because of the pasuk, correct. No, compost is a different thing. Yeah, it's not a question of use. It's not a use and utilization. It's a matter of it's because animals have those rights. Rav Osner does not accept this at all. He says, now he has two issues. Issue number one, Rav Osner has two issues. Issue number one is the pasuk. So anything that animals would eat should be kadosh. Nekuda. It's not up to you to decide to mafkia from the animals again. If you want to pick the cucumber and eat the cucumber, so eat the cucumber. You don't have to save it for the behemoth. You have your right. But if you're going to throw it out, you can decide to throw it out. And then he brings a raya that the Chazon Ish is going to have a good answer for. He says like this. שטות משנתנו כלפי רימון והנץ, כלפי אגוזים יש להם שביעית, מוכח, וההלכה קבועה לדורות בשביל שראויים לצביעה. ולדעת החזון איש ראוי לצביעה עדיין אינו התנאי שלהם, רק שצובעים בו באמת רוב העולם, או יעשו כן רק מיעוט העולם, רוב העולם יזרקו כלפי רימון, תיפול הלכה זו, סתימת העניין במשנה וברמב"ם לא יראה כן. It says like this, the Mishnah says כלפי רימון והנץ are kadosh. Why? Because they're used for dye. Now, are they still used for dye? No. So are they no longer kadosh? It's a trick question, right? So Rav Wosner says, of course they are. Why? Because the Mishnah says. Because the Mishnah was written L'Dorot Olam, right? The Mishnah was written L'Dorot Olam, not only for their generation. The Mishnah was written forever. So if the Mishnah says that Klipei Rimon are kadosh, so Klipei Rimon are kadosh, even though no one use them for dye anymore. That's what Rav Wosner's second point. So Rav Wosner has 2 points. One is the once Chazal decided this is kadosh, it's kadosh. Period. Otherwise, you're telling me the Mishnah isn't eternal. That's a problem. It's a theological problem. And the other is the Behemah is right. The Behemah has rights to the fruit, and therefore you have to allow it its rights. Now, so the first thing about the Behemah's rights, that Behemet is a problem, as I said before. It might depend on what you pick it for, right? That's what I think Chazon Ish said. There are also human rights, human needs for burning lumber, and yet you don't say it's kadosh because of the fire, for your heat. Why? Because most of the lumber is not used for that. Mimelo chimacharov, and pirov, it's for that. Mimelo, also the potatoes, pirov are used for humans and not for animals. That's how the Chazon Ish answers that point. Now, as to Klipei Rimon vehanetz, here I think he fell into the Chazon Ish's trap, because the Chazon Ish never says this. Chazon Ish generally doesn't accept that mode of thought at all. Chazon Ish reads all Mishnayot as concepts and not as specific facts. All Mishnayot, the Chazon Ish always reads as ideas and not as specific detail. So, I can give a few. I'll give one example. The Chazon Ish says about squeezing oranges on Shabbat. The Gemara says that only olives and grapes are right. Getting extracting the juice out of olives and grapes is Isur D'Oraita of Dash, and any other juice is not Isur D'Oraita. The Gemara says. The Chazon Ish says, well, there's a machlokes Rishonim. What does this mean? Does this mean that specifically olives and grapes have some kind of special Misheshet Yemei Bereshit? Olives and grapes were created for olive oil and for wine, or is it just in their world using fruit for juice was a waste? But what about Tropicana oranges? You think you have to squeeze them on Shabbat? Chazon Ish says, Fik D'Oraita. The Tropicana oranges, in other words, the ones that are grown in Florida for squeezing. But the oranges you buy in the store, tough. Depends on what zan, right? Depends on what kind of fruit it is. But in a chinami, the Gemara says that anything that's not grapes or olives is not d'oraita. So how can you say it's d'oraita? So now what the Gemara is saying, the Gemara never said that only olives and grapes. The Gemara says only such fruit that's generally used by everyone for squeezing, and the primary use is used to extract the juices of. So that's all it says. Now, the examples the Gemara gave were olives and grapes, but those are just examples. The Gemara never said that. So here too, the Gemara never said that the pomegranate peels are kadosh v'rishat shvit. Did the Mishnah ever say that pomegranate peels are kadosh v'rishat shvit? You say, wait, in my Mishnah it does say that, right? That's what you're supposed to say. Right, but the Chazon Ish says that's not what the Mishnah says at all. It gave you an example to tell you the concept. The concept is the kind of peel that everyone uses for dyes has Rishat Shvit. In a chinami, the day it stops being used commercially for dye, it'll stop being kadosh. So that's the Shevet HaLevi says what you could say that the Mishnah isn't eternal. It says the Mishnah is eternal. The Mishnah never said pomegranate peels. I say it does say pomegranate, right? But it doesn't mean pomegranate peels. It means the idea of something that everyone uses for dyes. Both ways, yeah. I had a couple of examples. I'll have to. Yeah, of course. Well, there's one of them, but Shvit is one of them. For some reason, rings a bell. Something about lash on Shabbat. Something about lash on Shabbat too. I don't remember what it is. I'll try to remember. I'll try to look at my notes. I think I once compiled like 5 examples of where Chazon Ish does this, just like ignores the wording of the specifics of the Mishnah for the concept. Let's have a look at Rav Shlomo Zalman. עיקר דברי ידידי הגאון אינם נראים לנו דעתי, שהרי מסתבר בשביעית צריכים להתחשב לא רק עם בהמות שבבית, אלא גם עם עוף השמיים וחיות שבשדה. שכן אמר לו שביעית בכל מיני ילין וקליפין. ובהם אנחנו לא חס וקרא בהמה, הוא רגילים תמיד לזורקן. וכל מקרה ודאי חיות שכאלה, שהם כן אוכלים אותן, כדי חברי זמורות שמאכל פילים. Rav Shlomo Zalman currently is attacking the first point, right? The first point about the animals' rights. Okay, do ostriches, are they animals? They say ostriches eat like everything. So they say they eat like anything. They'll eat leaves, they'll eat pits, they'll eat whatever. There's basically nothing that grows that isn't toxic that an ostrich can't eat. Any vegetation, an ostrich can eat. So all vegetation is kadosh, right? Because of the ostrich rights, right? We're all equal rights. That's what we're working on here today, right? So what about, right? So we're thinking about all the minorities, right? So what about the elephants? What about the ostriches? So we're thinking about cats, we're thinking about goats, we're thinking about cows, what about chickens? But what about the ostriches? What about the rhinoceros, right? They also have rights, right? Rav Shlomo Zalman says once you go there, there's no end. You'll have to say that. And once you start saying that, say you're a minority too, right? So it ends up happening. So there's no vegetation that isn't kadosh once you say that. So really, there's nothing you can ever throw out. You can't throw leaves out, right? If you have too many leaves on your tree and it's pulling down your tree, so you're allowed to pick the leaves and throw them out, right? If it's harming the tree. Can you throw them out, or do you have to find ostrich or whatever to eat them? Bol shelo, right? Bol shelo. He gives the example of flowers, right? There are animals that eat the flowers, right? Obviously, the flowers are not kadosh feet. Why not? The answer is like this. כיוון דמקרא דברי הייתה לכם לא אוכלה לפי שצריכים לאכול כדרך אכילה, דבר שלכל לאכול חי לא אוכלנו מבושל. ודינמי דית לך למימר, לקרא דלא אוכלן נאמר אלא על דברים שרגילים לאוכלן. כל מה שרגילים לזרוק להשפעה. ולא נאמר כלל קרא דלכם לאוכלה על דברים שבכל השנים חשובים כאפר בעלמא. Meaning, I presented until now, I presented that the issue is that we have והייתה שבת הארץ לכם לאוכלה, לך, לעבדך ולמתך, ולשכיך ולתושבך, ולבהמתך, ולחיה אשר בארצך. And they're all equal, and they're all the same, right? Except for one thing. That's not the way the pasuk starts. The pasuk starts, והייתה שבת הארץ לכם לאוכלה. Meaning, humans do have a say. Humans do have, the criteria does go through them. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm allowed to needlessly pick things that the animals would eat out there. I can't take the hay and throw it out. If that's machal bema. But if I took a potato for machal adam, it becomes lachem, and I don't need to take the behemot into account at all. That's his chidush. It's not only, there's more extreme than Chazon Ish. Chazon Ish said, when you pick the potato, you decided that that's for human consumption. That's a Chazon Ish. The Shevet HaLevi says, who gave you that right? Who gave you the right to decide it's for human consumption? Now, Chazon Ish's answer is, the Gemara says that when I pick it, I have the right to decide. But Rav Shlomo Zalman says it's deeper. It's not just a matter of when you pick it. It's means that you're the primary consumer. So whatever you pick, you're allowed to utilize the way you see fit. So if you have parts of the fruit that no one uses, you can just throw them out. So if you have not the carrot peels, but the carrot, edge, whatever it is, the carrot, I don't know what to call it, right? The flowering part of the carrot, right? The head, all right, the head, right? You can definitely give it to a goat or to an ostrich, but you don't need a heads or tails. You can give it to an ostrich, you can give it to a goat, but you don't need to. Because once you pick that carrot for yourself, the alachem lochla. You're the primary consumer. You're the one who gets to decide about that.